So I've been sick for a few days. I'm recovering, doing pretty good now. Brain fog was so bad that I was walking outside to get some fresh air and started patting my pockets looking for my phone, only to discover it was already in my hand. Isn't it crazy to be looking for something that you already have? Isn't it crazy to be frantic that you're missing something that was there all along? So today, I was going to continue on the Abraham and Sarah story. We'll get back to it. But I want to jump ahead to Jacob. That's Abraham's grandson. And the reason I want to jump ahead to Jacob is because Jacob had an experience where he was in a bad way. So, backstory. Jacob was born along with his twin brother Esau to Rebekah, who was the wife of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. When Rebekah was pregnant, it felt to her like the two babies were at war inside of her. And so she prayed about it, and the Lord revealed to her that indeed there were two boys in her who would become two nations. And then he said that the younger would basically usurp or rise above the older one, which is not normal. What's normal in their culture is that the oldest is the one who gets the birthright and the blessing. So Abraham had been promised that he would become the father of a great nation, and that blessing would go on from generation to generation until the seed should come, who was Jesus, which they didn't fully understand. But anyway, so the blessing should have come through Esau. So before I get you lost and bored in the details, here's the deal. Once she understood that the younger, Jacob, was supposed to be the blessed son, she took that on as pressure. God didn't tell her that as something that she needed to become responsible for. He didn't tell her that as something she needed to make happen. He told her that because that's the way it was going to be. It was a promise. It was information. It was the future revealed. But she didn't take it that way. And when we take on the promises of God as pressure, nothing ever good happens after that. So as they got older, grew up, Isaac was showing signs of aging. He'd lost most of his eyesight. He was not doing well. And Rebekah got wind that he was going to give the blessing, that he was going to pass the blessing on from himself to Esau. Now, Jacob had already tried to get Esau to give him the birthright. Esau had been out hunting one day. He came back. He was famished. Jacob had a meal ready to go for himself, and Esau said, I want that. And Jacob's like, yeah, sure, you can have it as long as you are willing to give me your birthright in exchange for it. And Esau, of course, said he was willing, but not really meaning it. But anyway, so when it came time for Isaac to actually give the blessing to Esau, Rebekah hatched a plan with Jacob. So Esau was sent off by his father to go hunting, to get him some venison, to make him a meal that he liked, that he enjoyed. And as he ate the meal, he was going to give him the blessing. So Esau leaves. And while he's gone, Rebekah hatches this plan with Jacob. And the plan is that he's going to pretend that he's Esau. And Jacob's like, this plan's not going to work. Like, Esau's hairier than me, he's different than me, it's not going to work. Anyway, they put some animal skins on him to mimic the fur, mimic the hair on Esau. He must have been some kind of a hairy guy. Anyway, and Jacob goes in and he lies and says he's Esau. And you can tell Isaac's suspicious. He asks a couple times, no, I'm Esau. And Esau is gone. And Jacob gets the blessing. Well, not long after, Esau shows up from his hunting trip, and now Isaac knows what Jacob did, and Esau knows what Jacob did, and Esau basically tells Jacob, as soon as Dad's gone, you're dead. So, not wanting to be dead, and his mother not wanting him to be dead, they hatch another plan. Now she lies to her husband and says, Esau already got married, and he married a girl from those bad people, the foreigners, so we don't want that to happen to Jacob. So I want to send Jacob back to where I'm from so he can marry a good girl. Really, she was sending him off to save his life from the hand of Esau. So off Jacob goes. On the way, first night, I think, very shortly after he left, he's sleeping for the night, he has a dream, has a vision. And in the course of the dream / vision, God tells him that he's blessed, that he's going to receive a great blessing. Blessing of Abraham is going to be upon him. He's going to be the father of a great nation. Almost verbatim, the blessing that God gave Abraham. Because remember, when God told Rebekah that Jacob was going to be the one to carry on the blessing, that he was going to be the preeminent son, he was not telling her that as something for her to accomplish. He was telling her that because it's what was going to happen. So Jacob goes on his way, and at that point, he's like not even sure he believes in God. He's a young guy, and he basically tells God after he has a dream, he's like, okay, well, he left home with nothing, didn't know where he was going, never met the family he was going to, had no idea how it was going to work out, if it was going to work out. So he basically told God, listen, if you can take care of me, feed me, have clothes on my back, then maybe you'll be my God. Maybe I'll serve you. Anyways, he goes on, makes it to the family of his mom's, meets them, they take him in, he falls in love with one of the daughters of his uncle right away. And the uncle and him hatch a plan for him to marry her. He says, you have to work for me for 7 years. Long story short, the uncle tricks him, gives him the other older daughter he doesn't want. And then he has to work 7 more years to get the one he wants, and then he works more years after that. Anyways, about 21 years later, things are not going well. His uncle keeps cheating him, changing his wages, messing him around. So finally he's had enough, and he tells his 2 wives, we got to go. And they agree. They're like, you know what? Our dad's not treating you right. He's not treating us right. Let's go. So they leave, and God had told him that he needed to go home. Well, home is where Esau is. Home is where death might meet him. But he goes. Now, somewhere in there, you'll have to read the story. It's in Genesis. Somewhere in there, God reaffirms to him the blessing. So he got the blessing at the beginning when he headed out 20-some years before. He's got his reaffirmed blessing when he tells him to go back home. Jacob is on his way home. Other stuff happens, not important right now. He's getting really close to home. And as he's getting closer and closer to home, his stress level is rising and rising and rising because he's about to meet his brother. And he has no idea how that's going to go. Except that in part of the blessing was that God was going to protect him and that he was going to live on to see many things. So him dying, from God's perspective, from what God told him, was not even possible. But you know how life is, right? Like when we get under pressure, suddenly all the things that we should know, that we did know, that we used to know, they kind of seem to fade away and the pressure becomes everything. So Jacob, being the schemer that he is, been scheming his whole life. He divides his group into 2 because he has 4 wives and flocks and herds and servants and the whole bit. So he divides them all into 2 groups, and then he has a whole bunch of stuff he's going to give his brother, animals and whatever. Puts those at the front. He figures maybe I can bribe him. He does all that. He sends them all ahead, and he's left alone. And all of his scheming hasn't helped. All of his planning hasn't helped. Nothing he's done has been able to shake the horrible feeling inside him that this is not going to end well, that he's going to meet the consequences of what he did to his brother, and there's nothing he can do about it. Now, I don't know who you are listening. I don't know what you've done, where you've been, what's hanging over your head or around your neck, what memories gnaw at you, what guilt chokes you. But the truth is, whatever it is, you can't do anything about it. You can't roll the tape back. There's no do-overs. It's not a video game. You can't press restart. Whatever you did, and it's done. So Jacob, he did what he did. It was done, and now he was facing it. It was coming back at him. So he's alone, and he lays down, tries to sleep. You can't sleep when you're in that situation. Anyways, in the night, some guy shows up, some random person. Maybe he thinks it's Esau. I don't know. But he reacts negatively, starts fighting with the guy. It's dark. He has no idea who it is. And they're fighting, and they're fighting. And the person he's fighting against finally says, "You need to let me go." And Jacob says, "I won't let you go unless you bless me." Now, in my church, we talk about the time of Jacob's trouble. And that reference of Jacob's trouble is that night when he's fighting this unknown assailant, trying to save his life from what he fears is his imminent demise. And when his assailant says, "You need to let me go," he says, "I won't let you go unless you bless me." Which means Jacob still is searching for, trying to acquire this elusive blessing that his mother told him was his from the start, because God told her that it was his from before his birth. And he has connived and schemed and planned and done all kinds of lying and cheating and manipulating. And even after all of that, he ends up having to run from home, and then God himself blesses him, not once but twice. And still, "I won't let you go unless you bless me." I'm telling you this story because I know there are people I know and love who struggle to sleep at night because they think they don't measure up, because they think they're not good enough, because they think someday the world's going to end like God said it is, and they're not going to be ready. And they think that way, and maybe you think that way, because somewhere along the line you missed it, or no one told you, or life just got in the way between you and understanding, or the pressure and the guilt of things you've done got bigger and darker and heavier than your ability to remember. Here's the truth. You already have the blessing. The Bible says that God has given a measure of faith to every person who comes into the world. And it's up to us to decide if we believe him or we don't. God's going to do everything he's going to do. All we can do is believe it or not believe it. Jacob was going to be the preeminent son. He was going to get the blessing of Abraham. The descendants, the seed was going to come through his line. That was going to happen no matter what Jacob did, because God said it would. And if what God says always happens, then God has also said that he sent his only Son, and that if anyone believes in him, they will not perish, but have everlasting life. That's it. There's no other qualifications. Do you believe it? Or don't you believe it? There are many people who will tell you, well, yeah, it's not that simple. Belief, well, there's this and there's that. No. In fact, I had someone tell me recently, I said, well, what about the thief who was hanging with Jesus on the cross right beside him? What about him? At one point, he was railing against Jesus with the crowd. Crucify him, crucify him. And then he came to his senses and he's like, remember me. When you come to your kingdom, remember me. And Jesus said, I'm telling you today, you're going to be with me in paradise. What did that guy do to deserve that? What did he accomplish to deserve that? What resume could he produce that would make him worthy of that? Nothing. He died, just like Jesus. Never was able to get baptized, never went to church, never paid tithe, never did anything. Now, do I think he would have done those things had he been freed and set free? Yeah, probably. But that's not the point. It's not the point. Any good thing that any one of us will ever do is a result of realizing that God loves us and that we already have the blessing. We can take him at his word, or we can turn his promises into pressure. I hope you'll do the beautiful, obvious, and good thing. Just believe him. I'll see you next time.